Maybe it should be easy to stay plugged into the sensory beauty of the world, but I've always found I have to work at it a little bit. Welcome back to the 50/50 Project, where every week I talk through an item on a list made up of one thing I've learned for each year I've lived. This week, we circle back to the body category. This is a tough category for me to grapple with sometimes because I'm not a very physical person, which is to say I live very much in my brain. I'm not an athlete, I'm not a dancer, I'm not even as good as I wish I were at caring for my physical condition, and I think that's because I lead so strongly with my head. I'm more of a thinker and a theorizer than I am an actor or a doer, and because of that, I sometimes have to get strategic and systematic in order to reconnect with my body so that I don't miss out or mess up. I need to keep reminding myself that life is a material experience. Which brings us to thing number 22, fire up all 5 senses. I've really been trying to tune into the world as a lived physical experience for a long time. But about a year ago, I read a book that really helped me get a little clarity on ways to do that. It's by Gretchen Rubin, who I've probably mentioned several times already, and it's called Life in 5 Senses. And it really helped me think more deeply about the ways in which living is a sensory experience and why it's so important to really see, hear, touch, smell, and taste your way through it, as well as thinking and emoting your way through it. It's a book well worth reading if you wish your day-to-day life was more vivid, so to speak. For me, the idea of experiencing life through the senses is really bound up with my desire to pay more attention to the round of the year and the changing of the seasons. I worry sometimes that adult life just becomes a flat, dull blur, kind of. Most of us work year-round, and if we don't work from home now, we work in a climate-controlled environment that never changes. Many of us spend less and less time outdoors, so it's possible to get in the kind of flatline slog that means I don't even really register the differences between mid-June or early January these days. And I hate that. I want to be aware of the round of the year and attuned to the traditions and the sensations of spring and summer, fall and winter. I really want to follow a pattern of life that has seasons and occasions, rituals and events. I think that has been a really important realization for me in terms of my personal day-to-day happiness. And perhaps unsurprisingly, so much of the wayfinding from season to season really lives in the body and in the senses. So for the last year or so, I've been making a wish list, a sensory wish list for each season. So as I'm recording this, it's the 2nd day of September, so I just made my list for the fall, which is very exciting because that is far and away my very favorite season. For my purposes, fall just runs September, October, November, and I try to choose a sensory experience for each sense for each month. So 3 tastes, 3 sights, 3 sounds, etc. This year, for example, I wrote down that I want to see autumn leaves in a beautiful natural setting. I want to taste a roasted apple. I want to hear the marching bands that play in the Circle City Classic Parade here in late September. I want to feel all of those crazy tactile sensations that come with carving a pumpkin. And for my smell, I have chosen 3 autumnal candles that I'll burn throughout the season. The candle thing is sort of interesting. I tend to burn through about 1 candle a month, so I just buy seasonally appropriate candles for each month. And I think my fall ones this year are mulled cider, harvest spice, and something, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a black candle with black bats on the label, and it's supposed to smell like Halloween candy, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I may get through this whole list, I may not, but just the act of making the list itself makes me think carefully about the sensory experiences that define the season for me, and it helps me not to miss out on them when they come around. And just in general, I think it gives me a stronger feel for the season we're in and the way it registers with me physically and materially. And all of that is kind of small, maybe a little silly. It might seem a little indulgent. But for me, it's really important, and it gives me a lot of happiness. I also sometimes do a quick exercise in the afternoons when I need a quick break from work called the 5-4-3-2-1 meditation. It's really simple. I usually just sit, take a couple deep breaths, and then I name 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can feel, 2 I can smell, and 1 I can taste. And you can mix those numbers and senses up in any way that you want, but it's just a short exercise that helps you connect with your physical environment. And I find that to be really helpful, especially when I've just spent several hours deep down in something theoretical or working my brain and not doing much with my body that day. I imagine that for many people, this probably sounds like a really rigid, formulaic way to go about things. And most of you probably don't need to be this systematic about things to make sure that you're connecting with the world through all of your senses. I imagine most of you are just naturally more in touch with the physical aspects of life. And I imagine being attuned through the senses probably just comes naturally. But for me, as somebody who's really in my head more than I'm typically in my body, it's been useful to do some of these exercises. And I think it has helped me be more conscious of sensory impressions just generally. Now that I've been thinking more about the 5 senses, I think I'm at least a little more likely to take the time to look and listen. I'm more likely to let myself touch flowers in a display at the store or take a deep whiff in the candle aisle. And I think at least once in a while I'm more likely to really savor a dessert or a cup of tea. I'll have more to say later about getting more in touch with physical conditions, but for now, my point is just that when I'm able to get out of my head and be in the world a little bit more, my life is richer and my days are happier. This world is sometimes beautiful to look at and beautiful to listen to. It's full of sweet smells and delicious tastes and comforting touches. And maybe when you're more fully aware of all these good and lovely qualities, it makes it a little bit easier to endure life's occasional ugliness and din and stench and bitterness and bruises. So I think it's something worth thinking about, even if the list itself seems like a little much for most folks. Okay, I think that's about enough for today. I hope your senses will be flooded with all kinds of good stuff. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I'll be back next week with thing number 23.